Hello, third graders. I'm here with the Jumbies. I am going to be reading chapters 13 through 15. Chapter 13, Something Good to Eat. As Corinne walked through the market the next morning, she heard talk of Severin on everyone's lips. "Did you see that woman in the green yesterday? I wonder if she will be back," said the woman with flaky skin. "You think anyone missed a woman like that? The real question is, where is she coming back from?" said her friend, narrowing her pebble eyes. "No one seems to know anything about her." To a customer, she said, "It's 15 for that hand of figs you've been touching up for the last 5 minutes. The customer sucked her teeth and moved on. When you are so pretty, everyone notices," Flaky Skin said. Everyone noticed her, but nobody knows her. No one is her friend. No one is her family. Who are her people? It's very strange. Anyway, she probably won't be back today. She only seemed interested in the witch." "But did you see the witch today?" "Yes, her arm looks bad," said Pebble Eyes. "It's a wonder she doesn't have some potions for that." Corinne passed all the talk and spread out her cloth and arranged her oranges. She took a quick glance at the white witch, who was sitting with her eyes closed beneath her tree as though she was sleeping. Drew's mother cleared her throat and said, "Morning, Corinne." "Morning, Mrs. Rootsing." Mrs. Rootsing darted her eyes at the witch and then back to Corinne. "You have no need for what she's selling, you hear me?" Mrs. Rootsing said firmly. Corinne nodded. After what happened the day before, she wanted nothing to do with the witch. She carefully positioned herself out of the witch's line of sight. Drew peeked around her mother's sari and Corinne waved her over. "You won't believe who came to my house yesterday," Corinne whispered. "Who?" "The woman in green, the same one from yesterday. Her name is Miss Severin." Drew frowned. "Why would she go to your house?" "Papa said she just ducked in because of the rain. I don't think she went there on purpose." "Is your house on the main road?" Drew asked. "No, but they were walking together from the sea." "Did she have fish?" "No," Corinne said. "Who goes down to a fishing village and doesn't get some fish?" Drew asked. Corinne shrugged. "Papa said she got there too late." Drew's mother tucked a few long strands of her braid behind her ear and cocked her head. The girls could tell she was trying to listen. "Who is she anyway?" Drew whispered. "I don't know," Corinne answered quietly. "Nobody around the market knows who she is or where she's from," Drew said. "They can't know everyone who lives on the island, can they? I've lived here my whole life, and we never met before yesterday. And there are plenty of reasons to go to the sea besides the fish." The girls looked up as a commotion started at one of the market entrances. Quick murmurs started up. Severin had returned. She walked directly to Corinne with a smile. "Hello again," Severin said. She held out some coins. Corinne wore a smug look, mainly for the benefit of Pebble Eyes and her friend Flaky Skin. "Hello, Miss Severin," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Which ones would you like?" "You pick. I know they're all very good." Corinne made a big show of choosing her best-looking, roundest, ripest oranges. Severin wrapped them and placed them into a woven basket that was hanging from her arm. All around them, women covered their conversations behind their hands, but it was obvious whom they were talking about as their eyes darted between Severin and Corinne. Drew raised an eyebrow at Corinne as if she was urging her to do something. Corinne understood. "It's a beautiful day today," Corinne said. "You won't have to worry about the rain on a day like this." "Yes, it's a nice day for a walk," Severin replied. "Do you have a long way back to your house?" "No, not far," Severin said. "Then it shouldn't be any problem to get a lot of things." "I suppose I could. What else will you be getting?" Corinne asked. "I didn't manage to get any fish yesterday," Severin said, "but I think today I will have better luck." She smiled. Drew and Corinne exchanged a quick look. That afternoon, when Corinne got home from the market, she wasn't entirely surprised to see Severin there. But she remembered Drew's question about the woman, and a little seed of worry planted itself in her chest. Severin stood in the kitchen fussing over a pot. Near her, the back door hung open, and Corinne saw her father just outside cleaning some fish from a pail. Corinne sniffed at the air and made a face. "What are you doing, Miss Severin?" she asked. "I offered to make dinner. It is the least I could do after taking up so much of your time and your father's yesterday," Severin said. Corinne felt the worry in her chest begin to grow, but she smiled. "You shouldn't cook," she said. "You are our guest." She got between Severin and the stove and peered in. Severin tried to gently move her aside. "I insist on it," she said. "Besides, it's the woman who does the cooking in the family." Corinne's chest tightened at Severin's words. She leaned over the pot and inhaled its scent. It didn't smell right. It didn't smell like any food she knew. Something about this dish was off. Something about Severin was off, too. Without a word, Corinne snatched up 2 dishcloths, grabbed the pot from the fire, and threw its contents out the back door. Severin's mouth dropped open with shock and then closed again in a straight, angry line. "Hey!" Pierre jumped out of the way just in time to see the contents of the steaming pot tumble down the hill. "That's not the way Papa likes it," Corinne said. She shook her head at Severin, as if she should have known better. "I'm going to have to start all over again with a clean pot." Corinne washed out the pot, refilled it with water, and put it back on the fire. Since everything Severin had used was now sliding down the fishing village, Corinne went to the yard to pick some vegetables and then added a few she had bought at the market. "Sit, I can do this alone," she told Severin. Pierre stepped inside briefly and hissed in Corinne's ear, "Did you have to throw out her food? It didn't smell so bad. Maybe you could have just fixed it." He made a nervous smile at Severin. "I think you don't cook too much, Mrs. Severin," Corinne said, "but I maybe can show you a few things. Since she started doing the cooking a year ago, she's barely let me touch the stove," Pierre added. "She thinks everyone's a terrible cook except for her. The thing is, she's probably right." He nodded his head at a chair. "Just sit and watch," he said. He went back out to the fish, but he moved close enough to open the door for Corinne to see him, and for him to see her. Severin returned Pierre's smile and sat down. Corinne felt Severin's eyes on her as she cut the sweet potatoes and the tomatoes, chopped the cilantro, and grated the ginger. Then Corinne tossed them all in the pot and stirred. As she cooked, the sharp, sweet smell of the ginger, tomato, and sweet potatoes rose out of the pot and filled the entire house. Corinne began to relax. She did not mind Severin looking at her as she worked. Corinne remembered the way Drew's mother watched Drew and her at the market, and she thought that was what mothers did. They watched. The worry that was growing in her began to fade. Pierre continued to clean the fish. The snapper's reddish-silver body was limp in his hands, and the scales fell to the ground like transparent leaves as he scraped them with his knife. He cut it open and took out the bones and the guts and laid the fish flat and open for Corinne to cook. Corinne washed the fish, then filled its insides with herbs and squeezed oranges over it before she took it to the fire. "How long ago did Corinne lose her mother, Pierre?" Severin asked. Pierre looked up as if at the first star that lit up the purple sky. Corinne was still very young. Her mother had always been sick, delicate, like she didn't really belong with us. I guess it shouldn't have been a surprise, but it was. It must have been hard to manage with such a small child and you alone. The other fishermen's wives were happy to take care of her when I was on the sea, and I took her out with me when I could, but Corinne has no love for the blue like me." He winked at Corinne. "You must have been lonely yourself," Severin said. The fish sizzled, so if Pierre answered, Corinne didn't hear it. "I have been alone for a long time myself," Severin said. "How well does she remember her mother?" Pierre pointed at the wax statue. "That is her mother, exact. She remembers. I won't let her forget." Severin turned towards Corinne. "It must be hard for you without her here." When Corinne passed near Severin to pull one of the spices out of the cupboard, Severin reached out and touched her arm. Something about the feel of Severin's skin against her own and the way she leaned in, probing Corinne's face, made Corinne stiffen. "Do you go to the witch often, Miss Severin?" Corinne asked. "Corinne!" Pierre said with alarm. Corrine looked down to avoid her father's glare, but continued anyway. My friend Drew says that people only go to the witch to get magic for their problems. Corrine, stop, Pierre said. I'm so sorry, he said to Severin. Why don't you step outside a minute? It's a little too hot in the kitchen. Severin joined Pierre in the backyard. The two of them looked out over the ocean while Corrine watched from the open door. I understand why you love the sea, Pierre, Severin said. It is beautiful. Their spot on the hill gave them a wide view of the sea, where the waves had turned orange with the final rays of the sun. You're right, Severin. It can be lonely on the sea, Pierre said. On land, too, Severin replied. Pierre and Severin looked at each other. Severin reached out her hand out to Pierre. Corrine darted to the door and yelled, Finished! She saw Severin pull her hand back. That was fast, Pierre said. I'm a fast cook, Corrine said. The three had dinner by lamplight, and that night, as her father put her to bed, Corrine could see in his face that he was thinking about the evening. She remembered how the creases around his eyes deepened with pleasure when the three of them sat talking. It's nice having the lady around again, Pierre said. She's not like Mama. Corrine said, No, no one is like your Mama. I meant that. I know, Papa. I miss her too. She reached up and hugged him around his neck. She didn't know what to think about Severin, but she couldn't remember the last time her father had looked so happy. Do you like her, Papa? I think I do. Severin made Corrine feel strange, but her papa was a good judge of people. Then I will try to like her, for you. Still, her heart beat fast with worry. Chapter 14, Cut. After market the following day, Corrine set off alongside of Bauki and with Malik close behind and Drew last in line. The brothers were showing off the red hills where they lived. The ground rose sharply and the rocks were often loose, making it treacherous enough just to keep most of the island out. The sun had sucked away all the water from the recent rain. There was hardly anything wet on the island. Even the leaves on the trees hung limp. The boys shot down a couple of juicy pomeracs to help with their thirst. They crunched through the bright pink pomerac skin to the sweet white flesh inside, tossing the big round seeds behind them as they walked. After about 4, Bauki spoke up. How do you like your new mother, Corrine? She visited your house 2 days in a row. If she's there again tonight, watch out. She's going to take over. Corrine wiped her mouth against her sleeve. She's not my mother. I run my own house, she said. Malik began to snicker. Bauki answered, Not for long, you don't. Now, if she were ugly, you'd stand a chance. He tossed a seed and pulled another pomerac out of his pocket. My father doesn't need her, Corrine said. Oh, sure, he doesn't need her. Who needs a woman, eh, brother? Especially a pretty one. She is pretty, Drew nodded. I heard my mother say so, too. She called her beauty rare. Malik pointed to the sky and dove his finger down. Bauki said, My brother thinks you should be extra careful with this one since she just dropped out of the sky. Corrine sighed. How do you know that a lady won't scoop up the two of you one day? You could get a mother too, you know. I've told you before, Bauki said, we don't need a mother. Even a pretty one? Corrine teased. Least of all one of those. The pretty ones are bad business. Not all the pretty ones, Drew said, but that Severin appeared out of nowhere. Don't you think it's strange? Why doesn't your father think so, and how come she isn't in her own house making her own dinner? The troubling little feeling in Corrine's chest grew again, but she held her chin up. My papa doesn't think it's strange. He knows what he's doing. The adults are always pairing up. It's truly sad, Bauki said with a shake of his head. Corrine turned on him. My mama and papa were together all the time. They weren't sad a day in their lives before she was, well, they were never sad. And my parents are together all the time too, Drew added. They don't look sad either. What's so wrong with pairing off? Who wants to be with the same person all the time, Bauki asked. Malik snorted and nodded in agreement. Maybe nobody wants to pair up with the likes of you, Bauki, Corrine said. Malik grinned. Ho ho, you two are comic. Bauki grabbed the end of Corrine's shirt and tried to pull her off balance. But Corrine twisted around and pulled away from his grip. He ran before she could give him a shove. You're all by yourself, and you're slow," she called, tossing her pomerac seed and dashing off after him. Balki and Kareen ran to the top of the high rocky ridge. Balki ran nimbly over the uneven surface, but Kareen was determined to beat him at his game. She was close behind. Suddenly, Balki stopped. "See that?" he asked. "Don't try to trick me," Kareen said. She was nearly on him now. "No, look." He pointed into the valley at the white witch bent over what looked like a small iron pot. "What is she doing?" Kareen asked, stopping beside him and catching her breath. "I don't want to find out," Balki said. He narrowed his eyes and began to back away slowly. "They say she can turn people into animals." "That's ridiculous. They say she's more than 200 years old." "Impossible," Kareen said with a laugh. Her laugh echoed around the valley, and the witch looked around, trying to pinpoint where it had come from. Balki dropped to the ground. "You'd better hide," he whispered. At first, Kareen didn't budge, but when the white witch began to turn in their direction, Kareen remembered the day at the river when the witch had called her stupid and told her to go home to her mother. A strange cold feeling came over her. She dropped to the ground. As she fell, a sharp rock sliced her leg open, and Kareen screamed as pain shot through her. Balki scrambled over to Kareen and put a dirt and pomerac-stained hand over her mouth to muffle the sound. When she stopped, he held her back down the hill. Drew gasped. "That looks awful," she said. Kareen looked at the blood covering her leg. "It's not so bad," she said in a brave voice, but when she tried to walk without Balki's help, a jolt of pain made her cry out and fall again. Malik pulled off his brother's cloth belt to bandage the deep gash. Kareen would have protested at the dirty cloth, but words wouldn't form in her mouth. With the cloth tied securely around her leg, Balki and Drew ducked their heads under Kareen's arm and hoisted her up. They were going to carry her home. It was after dark when they arrived. Every step hurt Kareen more and more. She felt weak and cold. As soon as they reached the path to Kareen's house, her papa burst through the front door. He scooped up Kareen and took her inside. Drew and the boys followed to explain what happened. Drew untied the piece of cloth that was around Kareen's wound. She tried to hand it back to Balki, but he held his palm up and turned his face away. Drew sighed. "I told them that running around the island was dangerous, but they would never listen to me." Pierre nodded. "Thanks for bringing her home. Just lie back, Kareen. I'm going to go get some water to wash the cut." Kareen lay back against the couch while Pierre hurried from the room. That was when Severin stepped towards them. "Let me take a look," she said. Kareen had not noticed Severin was there. As Severin came forward, Kareen's muscles tightened. Drew and the brothers took a step back, looking at each other with wary eyes, but Kareen had nowhere to go. "So delicate," Severin said softly. She put her finger into Kareen's cut, and Kareen howled in pain. Malik ran between Severin and Kareen and stood stiff like a guard. "What are you doing?" Drew asked the woman. Severin leveled an angry stare at the four of them just as Kareen's father returned with a clean, wet cloth. Malik moved out of the way, but Severin stood her ground. "Step aside, Severin," Pierre said. "I know what to do to help," Severin insisted. She put her palm on the cut and muttered something under her breath. Kareen thought she saw Severin's eyes flash with yellow light. She screamed again. "You're hurting her." Pierre pushed Severin aside. She stumbled backwards as Pierre began to gently wash Kareen's cut. Kareen winced in pain again, and her eyes squeezed shut. "Papa," she whispered. She felt her father's cool fingers brush against her hot skin. "Shh," said Pierre. "I'm here, you know. I'll always take care of you. It'll be over soon." Severin's face was hard. She put her hand on Pierre's shoulder. "You don't know what you're doing," she told him. "I know what will help her." He shook her off. "I can take care of my own daughter, Severin." Severin's eyes burned with anger until they shone like hot coals. While Pierre finished tending to Kareen, Severin looked around as if she didn't know what to do next. Her eyes stopped on an object across the room. Kareen saw that she had found her mother's wax statue. She gasped. Pierre picked up the cloth he had pressed against Kareen's leg. Sorry, he said. "I'll be more gentle." Severin stomped to the shelf and picked up the hard wax figure in her hands. She looked at Corinne with her eyes hard and shining and dropped it on the floor. The wax broke into 2 pieces that skidded in opposite directions. Severin stormed out into the night. Corinne looked at Malik and pointed at the open door. Malik nodded once and headed towards it, waving for his brother and Drew to follow. Drew picked up the statue pieces and wrapped them in the end of her sari. Drew peered back into the room where Pierre still leaned over Corinne with an apologetic smile. Then Drew rushed after the brothers into the night. Corinne winced as her father wrapped her cut, but she kept trying to see out the door. "Stop moving, Corinne," Pierre said. "You're making it worse." He went out back to wash out the claws in a bucket. Corinne tried to lie still and listen, but there was nothing except the usual sounds of animals in the night. Then came the sound of footsteps running up the path. "She's gone," Balky said. "Where?" Corinne asked. "We lost sight of her around the bend. When we got there, she had disappeared," Drew finished. Malik spread his fingers wide and moved his hands apart like something blowing away in the wind. "That's not possible," Corinne said. "We looked everywhere," Drew said. She ducked her head and lowered her voice when Pierre walked back into the room. She wasn't up or down the road. Malik looked at the ground for tracks, but he could not find any, Balky said. "Where could she have gone?" Corinne asked, but an idea was already starting to form and her heart began to beat faster. Malik turned towards the window and pointed out at the trees. "Nobody would go in the forest," Drew said, "especially not at night." "Unless Severin is no body," Balky whispered. Drew pulled her braid through her fingers and tugged at the end. "No, she can't be," she said. "Their kind can't come out during the day. The light destroys them." "But what else can she be?" Corinne said. "I didn't believe in them before, but maybe she really is a—" "Don't say it," Drew pleaded, but the word was already on Corinne's lips. Jumbie. Okay, chapter 15, Muddy Tears. The Jumbie crawled with ease over thick trunks and gnarled underbrush, even though night in the forest was pitch black. After centuries of moving among these trees, she knew the paths through the dark and tangled roots as if she had carved them out herself. The branches that caught at the hair of humans and the picker bushes that scratched their skin never hurt her. She knew each one. She also knew when people had walked through them. She could smell their blood on the edges of thorns and the scent of their skin on even the tiniest thread that got ripped off their clothing. In this forest, the ground and every plant that grew from it made way for the Jumbie. The people didn't have her command. Plus, they were clumsy and afraid, and the creatures in the mahogany forest happily made obstacles for them if they dared to pass through. Usually, the farther she walked into her own land, the happier she became, and not on this night. On this night, all she could think about was the way Pierre dismissed her, how he pushed her aside. The night before had been so different. She thought she was gaining their trust, but now everything had changed. "They don't see me as family," the Jumbie muttered. "They only see each other." She seethed. "They will never accept me." A muddy tear spilled onto her cheek, then sprouted legs and crawled down her body. "I was right all along. This island was better before people came to it. It is time for them to go, but not before I repay their kind for luring my sister away from me." The Jumbie's hand shot out and grabbed a small furry creature by the neck. It wriggled as Severin squeezed tighter and tighter with her thumb and forefinger until the small bones snapped and the creature became still. She brought the dead animal to her chest and stroked it. "I will give my sister's child a choice. Maybe she can be convinced to join me." She squeezed the animal again, and for a moment it trembled as if it was coming back to life. But it was only a flicker. She opened her mouth and gobbled the little creature, bones, fur, and all. "I can feel the power in her," the Jumbie said after she swallowed the animal's crunched up bones. She licked her lips. "And I need it." Okay, so it is confirmed Miss Severin is a Jumbie, so we'll have to see what happens next. Bye, you guys.